My name is correctly spelled. I am here as a representative of the board, as well as one of the members of the recruitment and selection panel for the appointment of the new CEO for Knysna Tourism. I'm also, for my sins, a municipal manager. To my left is Councillor Stephen Frisk and Mr. Leslie Peters, and I think you can just introduce yourselves and tell the room in what capacity you are here.
Good morning. I'm here in the capacity as a board member, Knysna Tourism.
Morning. I attended the meeting as a previous board member, and I was an invited observer to the CEO selection process.
Right, so how are we going to run the process is, first of all, I'm going to just give an apology on behalf of the acting chair, Nan, who unfortunately is out of town on business that she needed to attend to, and hence has requested that myself and my colleagues deal with this process in her absence. I'd also like to acknowledge Kathy White, who is also a board member from Sedgefield. Hi, Kathy. We did invite other board members, but unfortunately a number of them obviously have, because they actually have their jobs, they're not able to join us today. Alright, so how this process is going to run is that Councillor Frisk will do a short press statement. Thereafter, there will be opportunities for questions, which I think, Johan, you've got a process if you want to run it. Speak questions, answers, speak questions, answers, etc. And then the new CEO will be doing a short presentation. We've asked him to do a short presentation in terms of vision going forward, strategy going forward for the next year, 5 years, perhaps, etc. And then thereafter, as you know, they have, and I hope all of you have put your name on the roster for the 15-minute interviews that are available. Should you and the CEO be willing to set up another appointment at a later time for more in-depth, that's completely between the two of you, and to make those arrangements. But for today, we are asking that people, the media keeps it quite tight and keeps it to 15 minutes. The press statement, press release will be handed out as well, and it will be emailed to all concerned during the course of the morning. Okay. All right. I think I've done my bit. I'm now going to hand over to Stephen, who's actually going to read the formal press release, and then we will take a round of questions.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. The Knysna Tourism Board today welcomed their new CEO. The board appointed Organizational Development Consultants, ODA, to assist with the recruitment and selection process. The process and sessions were facilitated by ODA Director Dirk Joubert. ODA met with the board and agreed on the specifications and the expectations of this position, as well as key characteristics required to fulfill the duties and mandate of this entity. After a call of interest, 115 applications were received from national and international candidates. The candidates were put through a dynamic and energetic selection process. The panel consists of Knysna Tourism Board members who were nominated by the board, namely Nan Raturat, Stephen de Vries, and former board member and Knysna businessman Leslie Peters, who was an observer to this process. Based upon the schedule of all applications received, as well as the series, the consultants facilitated an agreement on a list of 38 candidates, possible appointees, which was then cut down to a short list of 5 persons. After the reference checks were completed, the candidates were evaluated by several competency-based exercises. The short list individuals were required to complete the EVALEX Zero Talent Assessment, a comprehensive assessment battery consisting of 2 main components, namely a management simulation section, which includes simulated management situations and case studies, and a more traditional psychometric section, looking at intelligence, personality type, and interest. In addition, some important cross-cutting competency were also tested for, including strategic capacity and emotional maturity. For the day of the interview, the candidates were given a topic to prepare a 10 to 15-minute presentation 72 hours prior to the interviews. On that day, they were further given 3 scenarios to respond to and were also asked to answer a series of predetermined questions posed by the panel. All candidates were subjected to the same process, and each candidate was afforded an equal opportunity to prove him or herself. Having compared the candidates' performance on the case studies, the interview feedbacks from references, as well as the results of the evaluator's assessment with the requirements of the position as advertised, the panel made a recommendation to the board on the appointment of the CEO. At its meeting of the 5th June 2014, the board unanimously agreed to appoint Mr. Dirk Vogt as the new CEO of Knysna Tourism. Thank you.
Yeah, Greg, would you like to come and join us? I think everybody knows Greg, who has been involved with tourism for a while.
Welcome, Greg. We're not going to open for questions right now. I think Greg can go into his presentation and his introduction, and we will then go into a formal question and answer sessions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Lauren, and thanks everyone who's here today. I thought a nice opening would be to just let you know a bit about myself. For those of you who have interacted with me in a more relaxed environment, I often talk about a cognitive illusion out there, and I'm sure you're all aware of it. You live with it in your own lives as well. And I'm going to just take you through a bit of my life and what makes it relevant to the role that I'm going to be playing on behalf of our town. The seeding process of my life began in Zululand. I grew up in Zululand. I was born in Zambia, and I went to King Global Primary School, where there were about 48 pupils. It was a farming school. And thereafter, I went to Durban High School, and I loved it. I'm very happy that that's a small announcement from my headmaster, because in that little document he says there that whilst I found the going in the form room difficult, I loved interacting on the sports field. I was a prefect, I was the deputy head of the boarding school, and it was a place I celebrated. I really enjoyed my schooling. My tertiary studies took me to Rhodes University, and I did my postgraduate at Natal University in Durban. And I add this last little certificate here because my passion for life included me getting involved in more than what Rhodes offered outside in the pubs. I worked for the Science Centre as a laboratory assistant, and that was a lot of fun, and it was my life. I engaged fully with it. I arrived in Knysna in 1995, and in 96 I was on the tourism board. It's a bit of a blur, but I was a board member. I was a marketing chairman at the time. We used to have a marketing chairman and a development chairman, and then a chairman, like 50 chiefs and no Indians there. But I also served on the RTO as marketing and as marketing chairman and as chairman. And one of the processes I really enjoyed at the RTO was taking the budget of 90,000 Rand to 900,000 Rand with a team of people that we worked with at the time. And it's quite an achievement if you work out basic maths. The concept of 90,000 and 900,000 is quite significant. At the same time, because that didn't keep me busy enough, I took on the role as the MTN Whale Route Chairman. But I was one of the founder members of it and actually procured the sponsorship for it. That began in 1995, and it included some real fun events like painting the first commercial aeroplane as a whale. don't know if any of you guys can remember that. Who's old enough here to remember that?
I'm not.
Those kids coming out of the whale, they are orphans from Johannesburg who had never ever seen the sea before. And I often refer back to the whale route because it was a three-dimensional experience. You know, when we just came up with the idea to paint a commercial airline as a whale, and we realized we had to get the money from a corporate. People said we're crazy, we'll never get it done. And I think that that's where the real joy of tourism comes in. We did a lot of other things in the whale route, which won us an international award, and I was privileged to go over with Peter During to receive that award in London. And I won a Raptor award for my efforts, which wasn't really celebrated locally, but it didn't need to be, because the whale route today is a great example of job generation, of marketing, of starting with something that was nothing. You know, when we went down and we started educating people that these animals out and floating in the water have a great economic value to you, people didn't really grasp it. I've consulted internationally. In Tasmania, if you Google Hollybank Canopy Tours, that was a process I was involved in. This is Peter During, who I actually was, he actually consulted, or asked me to consult for him. That is the process. It was about a 6-year process. And I had the privilege in those 6 years of looking at Tasmania and what they did. And I'm mentioning this because it's relevant to how it shaped my thinking whenever I came back to Knysna. And 2/3 of Tasmania is forest. And they had a number of different things there that enabled us to convert natural assets, or examples of converting natural assets, to exercises. I was in Taiwan and worked with the Taiwanese Cetacean Society, and that was quite a pleasure. These are information centers, and some of the work that we did, also just from a cultural perspective, it was interesting to see how they worked with the local culture, which was very different to the Chinese. The eastern side of the island is very different to the Chinese side of the island. And we work with culture, it's big in our lives. And all of this sits within my DNA, which enables me to do what I do today. You can't really see that photograph properly, but it's a harbour painted with whales on the background and fishing. And these people were doing things naturally. They didn't actually realize that they were creating a culture of their lives. Because of my positions on the RTO, at the time you were naturally seconded to the Western Cape Tourism Board, and I enjoyed a good few years under Rick Taylor's tenure as the chairman. Rick moved on to the ICC, was it CTIC? And I learned a lot from Rick. It was enjoyable working with him. I will often use the word tourism practitioner, and I don't think there are many tourism practitioners in South Africa. We take it for granted that the person who comes down as an accountant, buys a guest house, and he's in tourism. Is he a holistic tourist? I'm not a tourism operator. I think a tourism practitioner is a person who has engaged with tourism at many different levels. Martin, I would recognize you as a tourism practitioner. The first time I met you, you were a guide on a ferry running your own business. Kingfisher Ferry, I think it was. And you've migrated through many posts. So when you're dealing with a guide, building the whale route, the whale route was not just a route. We changed legislation twice. What was my day job? It was developing the Brenton-on-Sea Hotel. Every bit of the Brenton-on-Sea Hotel that I had a hand in developing burnt down, and it wasn't me who burnt it down. I still have a very good relationship with Eddie Bain. I've published the Garden Route News, and at the time, the RTO needed a communication channel, and the Garden Route News was a bold move of creating communication so that people could understand what the new white paper asked of them, what was its intention. And out of that came the Garden and Tourism Update newspaper, and it, once again, was designed to get people to understand what the tourism legislation asked of them. Discovering SA was a publication that served Engine, and it was interesting that the call center we developed from that was adopted by SA Tourism. And I was the founder of the Garden Investments newspaper that, what's his name, Paul Weavers, eventually became the publisher of. Route development, as I mentioned, the MTN Cape Wheel route that became the whale route, and then incorporates boat-based whale watching. And I remember in 1995 going out along the route, it was the Cape Whale route then, and telling people that in Asia and Africa, 0.5% of $504 million was generated in it. We should build a whale route, a three-dimensional experience that will bring more tourists to our towns. And it was amazing that by 1999, we were one of the 5th fastest growing whale watching destinations in the world. And it was one of the most amazing journeys. And yeah, I'll just quickly get away from there because I spelled that wrong.
I didn't write that.
You know, we changed legislation twice. At the time, in 1995, you were not allowed to go closer to a whale than 300 meters. We had to, when we went along and we said, well, we have to teach these people, the people who were going to go on boats had to be trained properly, and the boat operators had to be trained. We went through major processes because the legislation and the structures were not in place within South Africa, tourism legislation and environment, to accommodate that. And I think that has equipped me to be extremely effective today in what we do, because I understand the process that's required. We created real jobs and built a coastline inventory, and very often in my language you'll hear me talking about inventory, because you cannot market unless you're marketing an inventory. It's my term for development. I was at the Knysna Elephant Park, for those of you who don't know, and my biggest achievement there was the national study, the scientific assessment for the welfare of captive elephants, which has just recently been signed. It's an international agreement signed by the National Research Fund. And once again, I would never have been able to achieve that if I hadn't been through the whale route. I believe I've left at a time when I couldn't make further difference. And to both the people, 80% of welfare of any animal is people orientated. If you don't have trained people, you have poor welfare, whether you're working with pigs or cattle or anything. What is my philosophy? My philosophy is you can't manage what you don't measure. Anyone who works with me will hear me ad nauseum saying stats, research, we have to measure that. And our future, and we've all been watching it unfold, under the Naturally Knysna brand, the core values of the Naturally Knysna brand are embedded in these key words: niche, adapt, optimize, and respect. And as you may have seen, we've slowly been getting those to cascade, another biomimicry term that Sue Swain drills into my head, cascade down into the community, because by embracing the Naturally Knysna brand, it's more than just what we look at. It's a lifestyle, and it leads us to market Knysna as a whole, which I have spoken to some of you about, that tourism is only one part of Knysna, even though it's a large part. By a holistic approach, you very often benefit more tourism operations than you realize, and I think that we're starting to learn that. It's a very inclusive process, which we're looking at, and it involves building Knysna's inventory, a term that I used and learned about during my whale days. Developing capacities is critical when you are building an inventory. And the word generating jobs, if you look at what that Wellroot did, it generated jobs. It didn't create jobs. And who am I? Well, my passion is conservation ethics, conservation tourism. I love paddling. Since I started the waterfront dice, I haven't as yet won any of 34 degrees South's vouchers. But that is me there in the front.
By a nose.
And it's my escape. I've raced every inch of the coastline from wilderness, from been out on that every inch of the garden routes coastline, 5 kilometers out to sea racing and thinking I would die. And I think that what I love about being out there is that it humbles you. You realize you're just this little speck in the ocean, and if you want to get in back through the heads, you have to just read the ocean and not be cocky. So any of you who think I'm arrogant, come and have a conversation out with me when we're out in the sea, and you'll see I'm very humble. And I love being taught by my children.
Okay, we're going to open the discussion right now. The floor, any of you that have made appointments with him obviously can have the discussion thereafter. I have to wave at you. Slow down.
Sorry, we're going to do 3 questions at a time.
All right, so the floor is open to anyone who has a question. Oh, you've got your hand up too.
I've got
Ask a
my
question,
hand up.
of
For
course you
once in
may.
my life, I didn't butt in.
I'm very impressed. Martin Hatchell, you're representing today?
This Tourism Week, an online publication. Greg, first of all, Councillor de Vries said that your intelligence was taken into account. Now, I have 2 questions, and they both go to ethics. The first is, can we talk about the elephant not in the room? The problems with the elephant park in the press at the moment, and the NSPCA, are going to reflect on you as the CEO. If not reflect on you, I think it's going to affect you. Can you address that? And the second thing is, you touched on it there, the question of tourism practitioners. Can you sort of unpack the idea of why it's so important that a person in your position has experience on hand, hands-on experience of being working with tourists and running products and hotels like you have?
Another question?
How long have you been appointed for?
Okay.
All right, the first question was the elephant in the room, which is about the elephants.
I'd actually like to address it, if I may. Again, you know, it's a sub judice case, and I've made my point in this case over here. You said it will affect me. One thing that I can tell you right now is that I made a difference. I didn't just work at a place. I actually worked I interacted with national government, and I changed things. And every individual working in this, every elephant operation throughout South Africa knows that. I don't need to defend it, and I won't defend it. I know that I made a difference, and none of that is under question in the 2 cases that are there. I still work and contribute through the scientific assessment, which is a process that started 4 years ago. And I think that it's a highly complicated and a very technical space that the public, it's very difficult for them to grasp. You know, there's many legislations, there's many acts, there's regulations, and I think that my parting words are that it's actually equipped me to be a better CEO than many people realize.
The other one was the question about the importance of being involved with tourists.
Can we just put that as a fourth question, so you can just work through the three and.
Oh,
Okay, so
Sorry.
so we're dealing with the tourism practitioners.
Yes.
yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
As I described, a tourism practitioner is three-dimensional. You have to have, when you're dealing with people who run businesses, and I've run a business. When you're talking to a guide, if you understand the guiding process and you've had workshops with the various theatres and you've actually accredited us through the CETA process, you know what that process is. You know, when you look at a guide and you see that guide's badge, you know exactly what that guide went through to get there. But more than that, I've been through two processes where we've actually developed the actual material that those guides learn from. In fact, I've got the one big book that was written many, many years ago, and you had a huge hand in that book. When you're dealing with a guest house who is struggling to make it, you know exactly where they get their business from, how they get it, you know what they're dealing with. When you look at an inventory and you see gaps in it, you understand what that needs, what it takes to build it. You're not asking of something that you've never done before. I've built a business from an idea to success. So I feel that whether it's from a route, whether you're talking to a tour operator, whether I'm talking to a small business owner, or whether I'm talking to Gert from Pezula, I nearly said Simone. He understands. If I'm talking to Leslie understands, I understand his business. And I can hold my own against any of those people. I'm also very confident that if we were to go out tomorrow and speak on a platform in London, at London World Travel Market, many of these people will be quite happy that I'm speaking on behalf of their businesses because I understand their businesses intricately.
Thanks.
The appointment period.
It's 1 year.
Yeah, it is 1 year, as of 1st of July until 30th of June 2015. Can I just follow on to some of the points that Greg made? Because I think the first question in particular should actually be focused on the board as well and the panel. We made the decision, we made the selection, so the question is, with all this going on, you know, why? I think that's a logical question to ask. I would like to say that from the get-go in this recruitment process, we tackled the issue of it was never put aside, although some people outside of the process would have felt that you shouldn't conflate the two because legally you might be treading on iffy waters in terms of labour processes. But we dealt with it head on. Greg, you were questioned about it, interrogated about it during the interview process. The board also took advice on the matter. We spoke to legal practitioners who specialise in labour matters. We spoke to environmentalists, and we spoke to various authorities as well that are concerned and involved in this matter or in similar matters. And based upon that, we felt that yes, it is an issue. It's not going to go away. It can't go away, and we're going to have to deal with it. But that should not prejudice the appointment in any way of Greg. And just in conclusion, the board also has and will take steps to obviously protect and to mitigate against any reputational risk that this might pose. But we'll deal with that as and when it arises.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
So what happens after the year? Are we going to go through the process again?
Okay, so I feel that. All right. So one of the reasons why I sit on the board is to protect the municipality's investment. And the council, about 18 months ago, after having a number of discussions internally with people in the tourism field and with the board, etc., came to a position that we needed to look beyond the 4 million, look beyond a year-to-year allocation, and look towards how we can make Knysna Tourism as an entity more sustainable. The second point of the debate was why only tourism, given that there are other businesses and other needs within the town. And we as municipality, as council, often will ask, why are you investing 4 million into tourism, but you're not looking at other issues, other businesses and sectors in the business environment. So the second issue then was, do we review the scope of tourism? And the past 18 months, a year, has been around creating a strategy. And Greg, I think you've spoken to a couple of people in the room around that strategy that the board has been working on. So the intention is that the next year will be about consolidating that strategy, just testing it with a wider group of people. Council will be having various discussions on it as well, and getting to a point by early next year where we can say, right, this is what it is we're going for. At the moment, we're looking at an entity which will deal with tourism, which will deal with we have DMO, we'll be looking at trade and looking at investment. Okay. So marrying the economic development imperative with tourism. And there will be a process whereby council will then have to assess, is this what it wants to, where it wants to put its money? Let me be quite upfront about it. For 2014-15, we do have an indicative amount allocated to this entity. And so we are assuming that, after 30th of June 2015, come 1st of July 2015, we are going to have to make an investment into whatever entity it is. Okay. We are not assuming that the organisation will be financially sustainable from get-go. And that's why, Atana, to answer your question, why only 1 year and what happens afterwards? Afterwards, the new strategy and the new entity must kick in. But I'm pretty sure that Greg's going to keep all of you up to speed as to how that develops through the next year.
Anyone else?
What about cooperation with other tourism instances?
Yeah.
In this
I've just got back from Wesgrow. I've been working with Fatima very closely. One of the things I've stressed in the past is we've had to fix up our own organisation so that we are better equipped to identify where those crossover points are. And I'm very excited to be sharing with you guys in the future some of the stuff that we've developed, and that will cascade across to those other areas. I think key thing has been to develop a strong understanding of the relationship line between Wesgrow, the region, and our town. Over the last few years, there's been a lot of, I wouldn't say speculation, but uncertainty. And we've returned to a point where we now know exactly where we're standing. We've got some projects we're doing together, and those projects benefit the neighbouring towns.
I'm Tanya Waterworth. I write for the Argus and various other publications. Just wanted to ask, last year, the MEC, when he was MEC of Tourism, Alan Wund, he said he's looking to develop, or they're looking to develop festivals. Knysna leads the way, obviously, with the Literary Festival and the Oyster Festival. Do you have any others on the pipeline that might come?
In terms of the inventory I spoke of, number one, the current festivals, how do we improve them? How do we improve our relationship with, because the Knysna Oyster Festival we own. Literary Festival is owned privately, and the Slow Festival is owned privately. So the challenge is to develop the relationship between yourself and that development practitioner. And I refer to them as development practitioners because they are developing an opportunity for the town to embrace. So our mandate is very clear. Whether it's the Terra sailing event that's going to be taking place in a month's time, when we go there, we have got two analogies. There's one that we call the dust storm. There's the terror event is coming, let's make a dust storm about it. And there's the other one that we say, how do we bring more people into the area to spend money? And that's the first part of the relationship we developed with these development practitioners. We say, let's get it very clear what our role is and how do we get more people into the area. When we speak to Ling Dobson from the Literary Festival, our objective is how do we grow the event, how do we bring more people into the area, and how do we make sure that the excitement built around the event translates into more business and economic development.
Can I follow on from that?
Yes.
Any other questions? Can you address the question of, is every event a good event for the brand? My kids wouldn't be seen dead at the literary festival, and I wouldn't be seen dead at the Speed Festival. Now, not that either of them is bad, but clearly there's a dissonance between the Speed Festival and the Naturally Knysna brand. So is every event good for us?
It's a good question, and I hate you for asking it. Basically, did you see how we approached it? Did you see the billboard?
I didn't like it. I thought it was the two didn't work together. Naturally Knysna and Roaring Motorcars. So I'm going to have a problem with Roaring Motorcars or Naturally Knysna.
We can't stop the event from taking place.
No.
We made our point very clear by putting up the fastest, our reigning champion, the Peregrine Falcon, and immediately bringing the biomimicry into that. We can't ignore, there's a lot, just in the whole biomimicry approach. You're going to have a conflict of what you let go to be a good sustainable town versus what you adopt. And I'm glad you used the analogy of the Literary Festival and the NAT Festival. At the end of the day, everything we did with the Speed Festival translated into meaningful, sustainable criteria. We used the Sea Cadets, the young guys, to work in the pits, and that's where we spent our money. Our money, in fact, Johan, I don't think $1 went directly to the Speed Festival. No. Every cent we spent, every cent we spent went to something meaningful. Some of the stuff we lost in terms of the economic development, making of the trophies and things like that. So again, we're very clear about where we spend money, and classic cars, whether you don't think it fits with Naturally Knysna or it does, that's where our focus is. It's a massive, massive market internationally. It's three-dimensional. It's not just about looking at vehicles. It's about the owners of those vehicles choosing to live here because they can drive them here, and they can meander up the Renendal Ramble, and they can enjoy themselves along there. And that's what we're promoting. And that's where every cent of ours went to. In fact, to such an extent that the classic car guys got a bit nervous. And they were saying, hold on a second, the Speed Festival, the only thing we gave the Speed Festival was a billboard. And I believe that is, if you look at the past festival, that they had 106,000 Rand went into that. Okay, and this time, not $1 went into it.
Okay, forgive me, one final point, and then I'm going to shut up. My criticism isn't at the fact that we supported the Speed Festival, but I would suggest to the Speed Festival that if we're going to go with Naturally Knysna, and this isn't a suggestion to you, but to the organisers, where is the sustainable transport? Where are the electric cars, the hybrids? Where are they?
You're right, and probably
because that comes into Naturally Knysna.
Let me be honest with you, and this is where Lauren and some of the board get nervous when I start getting honest with people. But
please never go into politics. Sorry,
one of the big challenges over the last couple of months. We stepped when we woke up in our space over there, and we're ready to start interacting with the world, and we had a brand, and not all the festivals were ready to work with us. And I would think that Speed Festival and us have to really start engaging with each other when we'll get to that space. Let's take the Literary Festival as a good example. We just clicked, we flew, it was beautiful. Working with wood. There's so much technical nonsense that takes place behind these things. But if you don't hear them, I think it's part of the successful way we're working, which no one measures. I hope that my performance thing will include that. I don't know if you can just make a note of that. But sometimes it's what you don't see and what you don't hear that is the success.
May I just add to that, and just to remind you that with the Speed Festival, they did, to try and blend with the brand itself, they did remove a lot of the aliens in the area where the Speed Festival was taking place. And at the moment they're in discussions with SA Motoring to replace trees, to try, you know how it works, the emissions, and then they want to plant indigenous trees. And that's how Knysna Tourism at that stage tried to marry the brand with exactly what you were saying, because Greg recognized
then
that
we'll forgive a
brand.
bit of criticism. That must
Yes.
But,
must be communicated.
Oh, it was.
to get to that space, we have to develop our relationship with them. There's trust that has to be developed, etc.
Sorry, that was actually in the press releases that were sent out to the media, the fact that they were clearing and stuff like
There was a press release?
that. I can send them to you because they're actually online and they were
I want to
promoted,
ask a
so.
question, which I don't think, if they don't ask it, but I've just got it online and tagged to us. So if you mind answering that to them, they might use the answer and I can answer online. The question is, how could a chairman be appointed as the CEO? That was now a direct question to us, and I think it's not clear out there that you were not the chairman. So if you could answer that.
I don't think it's fair that.
Yeah, I think it's fair that you answer.
Drink.
You don't have to leave the room though.
There's some whiskey at the back.
So why is it I'm very flippant to answer, but that's not the answer. I think what, let's talk about what transpired. As you know, for a number of months we have not had a CEO. And it was at a critical time for the organisation because, as I indicated earlier, the council was breathing down its neck and saying, come guys, get your house in order now. You know, we need to start reassessing what it is that you're doing, how you're doing it, and how viable you are. So what happened is that the board requested Greg to assist the consultant who had been appointed to look at the strategy with the board. And Greg did this while chair, all right? But so I've seen lots of stuff out there that Greg was appointed CEO and he was acting CEO and he was acting director and all these fun. That did not happen. He was chairperson and the board requested him to assist for a specific piece of work which was around the strategy. When the time came that we started the recruitment process, it was at a board meeting, and I remember very clearly, because again it was an elephant in the room, and that was, so Greg, are you going to apply? And nobody wanted to ask the question until I said, look, Greg, are you going to apply? Because if you're at all thinking about it, you must leave the room right now before we start these discussions. And your answer, Greg, was that you haven't actually considered it, and you said, well, in that case, please leave the room because you're talking about considering it. And what the outcome of the discussions about Greg was is that we gave you 2 days to make a decision.
Yeah, I was the only one who met my deadline because I gave you guys a deadline that you didn't meet, remember?
Yeah. We gave him 2 days to do what he needed to do to consider whether he was going to apply or not. When he came back and said yes, he was going to apply, immediately he removed himself as chairperson, which is why Nan has been the acting chair, and was excluded from all discussions around the CEO and the process around that. And I think the board was quite hard on Greg in some ways. And Greg, being a very hands-on person, I won't say struggle, but you know, he had to distance himself. And he was under a lot of scrutiny, publicly as well as within the organisation and by the board, to make sure that there was, you know, we had a very clear line in terms of this recruitment process.
I think.
And my last sentence. And in terms of how can CEO become a chair, how do you legally exclude somebody from putting their name into a hat based on a position, a voluntary position that they are holding, you can't do that. You've got to allow people to enter into a process and then let the process unfold, which was 115 applications, a short list of 38, a short list of 5, anywhere between a 12 to 15 hour interview selection process if you include all the tests, etc., and you come out with a result. So, and I think we were very aware that this question was going to be asked.
Yeah, that's why
which was
I've
why
asked it.
we were quite particular about how we dealt with it as a board and as an organisation.
In your press release, the whole process is explained as well. So
Yeah, no, I think that Greg is not the first and won't be the last, whereby you find the chairperson becomes the CEO of an organisation. Whether it's private companies, whether it's Section 21 companies, and government, you find mayors becoming municipal managers. So I think that is not a phenomenon that is not here, especially in South Africa. It's something that happens a lot. As long as we as a board are very confident that the process was transparent and that it was fair. And hence we don't see that it was we were advantage in terms of other candidates.
Yeah, I think also, as someone who's dealt with quite a number of high-profile appointees, and I'm not talking about the municipality at all, but with external people, you expect a certain amount of scrutiny, and therefore you try and ensure as far as possible that you keep the process, ensure it has integrity.
And Lauren, may I just add about Evaluex? They spoke with me this morning. They were the people that did the psychology appointment and the psychometry more than the psychology. And Greg and all the 38 candidates were put, the shortlisted of 5, put through the rigorous testing. And this morning he confirmed that Greg, he did exceptionally well. He couldn't give me a percentage, but of the 8,000 case studies that they have, Greg was in the top of that, and he... Yes, please.
Despite the intelligence question.
Yeah.
That's what we asked.
We gave you the benefit.
That's why I wasn't...
Leslie, if you could reply to that, that would be great.
I don't necessarily want to reply to that, but I think for the benefit of all, let's just put the issue of chairman and CEO to bed. For background information for the press, ODA, who was a consulting firm, for those of you who might not know them, have been consulting with Knysna Tourism for the past 12 years, as well as many other tourism organizations throughout the country. They have been the consultants on the 3 previous CEO appointments, of which I was involved with. They've also been consultants on strategy processes. And I think the reason that I was invited was, in fact, to interrogate the integrity of the process, specifically given the fact that we had an internal candidate. And also, I haven't any vested interest. I'm not on the board. I'm not directly involved with Knysna Tourism. It enabled me to evaluate the process, to evaluate its fairness and its integrity. And I can tell you that the Evaluex Assessment Center test, if you want to call it, or assessment, is comprehensive. It was done for all. There was an in-tray for all the candidates, as been said by Councillor De Vries. I think that Greg was just another applicant. I think the fact that he played a role as a CEO did not advantage him at all. Perhaps a little bit of local knowledge, but that's about it.
Can I speak to that test a bit? I did a calculation. 7% of the total time I was interviewed was with you guys.
Physical.
The balance of that was that exam, which was an 8-hour online exam. Each module required anything between a half an hour to an hour of reading. It translates into 14 hours of preparation, which excludes the Friday preparation that you gave us, which was an hour of briefing and about another 4 hours of work, depending on how much you did. That resulted in a 12-minute presentation. And when I finished that engagement with those various tests, one module would have anything between 50 and 80 questions in it. And those questions are independent of Knysna, independent of anything relating to tourism. They're CEO profile tests. And you had a specific time to finish them in. And they double-checked in 80, when you're being asked 80 questions at a time, you forget, you can't lie, you can't manipulate that test because speed is against you. And I felt very comfortable that I always battled with the fact that how would I deal with a new person? I would be chairman, and I'd agreed with Dirk that I would assist that chairman for the better of Knysna. I would assist that CEO through the process to create continuity, because we realized continuity was the most important thing. And as an individual, it was challenging, but I knew after the testing that the person that got it would have really earned it.
And the EvaluX web address is on your press release, and the process that Greg went through is the EvaluX 40. So if you want to go on the website,
Was it EvaluX 30?
because I just spoke with the chap this
No,
morning.
30.
Okay,
EvaluX 30.
sorry.
And I
Thank you.
think one should just conclude it by saying also that the assessor had no idea who the 5 forms belonged to. There was no name,
Blind, is it?
it's just blind test, so that there could be no undue influence.
Anyone else?
Just a housekeeping question. When is the new board being selected? Or is it
Adrian's August.
again in August?
Another housekeeping question. Does anybody have any objections to not publishing this video on YouTube?
I think it's transparent.
No
There's
problem.
nothing.
As long as you Photoshop and make it.
Yes.
Always photograph from slightly above. So.
Oh, could you Photoshop a smile on the street?
Doesn't happen often.
Photoshop can do anything, but not less effective.
Did you?
Were candidates in the final selection process told it's only going to be an appointment for a year?
Yes, it was advertised.
Because the advert.
Only for a year.
Yeah.
So it was from the beginning of this.
Yeah. And that was if I may, that was a strategic decision taken by the board, because immediately then you cut out a lot of people, because it's a high level position, and people in that bracket are aware of the dynamics.
I missed that.
That was the measure you did.
I think you should perhaps ask for a copy of the advert, because it also alludes to a further 3 to 5 year contract. It's actually stated in there that upon the successful completion of a year, achieving certain objectives, there's a 3 to 5 year contract. It's actually stated.
This also speaks to the new organization that the board envisages, so that everybody knew that it was not tourism alone, it was trade and investment. So all of that's in the defense.
Anybody else have a question? I love this.
I think that's it.
And that wraps it up, and now we can
Yeah.
go to
Thank you.
please help yourselves to snacks and chat to Greg.